it's Shel C from PaperOcotilloStudio, and the gracious people over at StencilGirl Products invited me to be on their blog as a guest person. And so I was feeling nostalgic and I was feeling the fall colors, and I decided that I wanted to do something I used to do a long time ago, which is to do card making using a method called One Sheet Wonder. And the idea behind that was to make a sheet of paper, cut it up, and make it into cards. And if you search on the internet, One Sheet Wonder, you will come up with all kinds of templates for doing this. They're everywhere because people have been doing it. It started back when I was a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, and that was like probably, I don't know, 15 years ago maybe. And so people have come up with every type of template. I found the one that I use today on Pinterest, but basically it's just thinking about ways that you can use smaller pieces of paper, making one piece and then making it into smaller pieces. Of course, today I am doing it with stencils from StencilGirl Products. Every stencil that you see is from them. And I'm using Distress Oxide ink pads and sprays. And I started out by using the spray through the Winter Berries stencil. And then the second one I did, I believe, is called Longwood Florals. I will have a list below the video of all the stencils that I used and the numbers and where you can go to order them, of course, StencilGirlProducts.com. But I'll put the numbers and names of all of them. Then for the Longwood Florals, I used the ink pads in Fired Brick, Peeled Paint, and Ripe Persimmon colors with the little ink pad applicators that you can buy from Ranger along with the ink pads. Then I went over the top with some Fired Brick Distress Spray through another floral stencil, and I can't remember the name of that one right now. And then I used, what color is this? It's not Vintage Photo, Walnut Stain Distress Ink through this leaf stencil all over the top. So basically I'm just layering one color of ink, whether it's spray or ink pad, over the top, over the top, over the top, and using different stencils in like a fall theme, fall colors, fall themed stencils, and just completely saturating this piece of 8.5 by 11 smooth cardstock and making it into a patterned paper. Now, some people would call this a masterboard. To me, this is not a masterboard. A masterboard is when you do a lot of different techniques like mixed media. You maybe put some collage and some stencils and some painting and some mark making and all that to make this board that you can then maybe cut up, or maybe you scan it and use it that way. It's a lot more involved process than this. This is just putting some ink through stencils onto some paper. So the next thing I did was to use that hanging moss stencil, and I sprayed it with water and flipped it over and put it down to make some oxidization. These are the oxide inks that I'm using, and when you put water on them, they make interesting marks by changing the ink into like kind of a grungy white color. And so I wanted to put some marks on that way. I also splattered it with some water, and then I soaked all that up with some paper towel. And then I splattered it with some of the walnut stain ink to make more splatters. Then I got out my template and I cut it up into the sizes that the template said. I really could do this without the template. It's, you know, if you just think about the size of a card, which in this case, these would be cards that fit into an A2 invitation envelope. That's 5.5 by 4.25. And you think about different sizes you could cut to make layers. I got out some cardstock. Some of it is a smooth off-white cardstock, and some of it is some tan with speckles in it, like a confetti tan cardstock. I cut those in half, and I was just showing that if you take an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and you cut it in half and then fold it in half, that's the size card you get, 5.5 by 4.25. Doesn't matter if you cut it the fat way or the skinny way, and whatever way you turn the card, it doesn't matter. It's just all going to be that same size that fits into the envelope that you can purchase at the office store called invitation size envelope. And this is, a standard card envelope. So then I started having fun. I've now got all these pieces of pretty paper. I grabbed some different scraps that I thought would match the ink colors that I used in the paper, which is like, oranges and golds and browns and greens, those fall colors. These are just scraps of paper. And I'm layering the paper, and in some cases I'm adding different fibers. This was some twine. I also took this, I got out a vintage photo colored regular distress ink, not a distress oxide, but the regular ink, which has its own properties, but it's a little bit more intense because the oxide has that bit of like haze to it. And I'm using that to make words to put on there, and I used another stencil from Stencil Club. That word authentic was from Stencil Club. And I just layered it up. I added some of the vintage photo through the stencil. I put the word on, and then I'm moving on to the next one. So this one, I picked one of the long pieces that fits long ways up on the up and down card. And I backed it with some kind of like cocoa colored cardstock, and I've been trimming all that with a zip trimmer. That's what I call it, from Fiskars. Just you can just zip everything, and it has a measuring at the top. And for this one, I decided I wanted to use a different stencil. This one's called Born to be Wild, and I made a little lion to put on there. I thought that was cute. Again, from StencilGirl. These are all artist designed stencils from StencilGirl products. So I used the fossilized amber and the fired brick ink to stencil this, again with the applicators that you can buy from Ranger to go with their distress ink lines. And I wanted it to have a little bit of lines in it. And so I just used a Jumbo Jet pencil from Joey's Artorama in a brown color. This is an impregnated charcoal pencil. And kind of freeform, put some lines on there with the pencil to make the lion have a little bit more presence on the card. So that was card number 2. This template says it will make 9 cards. So that's what I'm making. 9 has enough pieces, but actually this one has, I'm using 3 of the skinny pieces that were cut off the very edge of the paper to do kind of like a triptych window pane looking sort of a card. It's kind of cool. Then I have these die cut pieces in a box, different tag shapes, and I decided to use one of the tag shapes because it's cut out of that same confetti tan colored paper. I put a little bit of a ribbon, like a grosgrain ribbon, and made a little tag. I accidentally got bloppy ink on there, and I had to tear it off and make another one. So that's how come it looks like that. I'm making a second piece to glue over the tag, but I stenciled some of that same stencil on there, put some splatters on it. It ended up getting kind of a drippy look, but it's interesting. That's card number 3. For the next one, I'm using kind of a sagey green paper as a layer. And I decided to use one of my own stencils that I designed for StencilGirl. This one is called Cactus Scene. And I'm using some copper acrylic paint because copper seems to go along really well with these colors that I'm using. And so I cleaned that off, and then I used that same stencil with the peeled paint which is an olive green, the Distress ink, across the card. The card, of course, being the vanilla type of a color, off-white color. And then I just glued my little layered piece with one side being torn on there. And you can see the cactus. Then I got out a stencil called, I think it's called Find My Tribe. It's a Carolyn Doobie stencil designed by her. And I took the words True Friends and stenciled them with the peeled paint. And then I put that on across the card. And I believe that one is number 4. Number 4 done. Yeah, number 4 done. So this method of doing one sheet wonders would be super fun to do for your Christmas cards if you're planning on making Christmas or Hanukkah or, you know, whatever you celebrate cards. These cards would actually be fun to do like invitations for Thanksgiving because they seem like they have those Thanksgiving colors and themes because that's what I was feeling that day. This one, I put the little thing acrossways. I put the piece acrossways and layered it with some type of orange cardstock. And then I'm stenciling with that floral stencil that I used with the same colors and making a piece to add. I decided to cut it down and just focus on one floral element. And I layered it on some orange and then stenciled onto the orange the word friends from that same Find Your Tribe stencil. And I added some of the yellow to kind of highlight the flower. Then I was thinking I needed something else, so I went and looked for some ribbon. And I tied some ribbon around it and tied it into a bow. This is a organza, a narrow organza ribbon that's gold. Gold, it works well with these colors too. Then I went around the flower with that same pencil, the brown pencil, just to make that flower stand out more. And that's card number 5. This one I layered with this the sage green again, but I decided to use another one of my stencils called Cactus, one that I designed with some titanium buff paint, acrylic paint. Distress inks aren't opaque, so I can't like use the antique linen and go over the top. I wanted to do that, and I tried it when I was making my big piece, and the antique linen didn't show up on the colorful background. So I knew if I wanted to make something light over the dark, I would need to use acrylic paint. So that's why I used the titanium buff colored paint through the stencil. And then I took this one, I layered that sagey green color piece on first. And then I cut this one in 3 pieces at an angle. So I'm putting one corner on 1 inch and then cutting and then putting the other corner on 1.5 and then cutting at an angle to cut it into 3 different pieces, which just makes it more interesting. You know, just makes it more interesting to have it split apart like that. I got out a stamp set that has 4 different stamps that say thank you in different ways. I use a lot of thank you cards, so that was why at my one concession, making some thank you cards, always a good idea for me. So I also put some grosgrain ribbon on that one, and that's done. Card number 6. For card number 7, I layered with red cardstock, and then I took that leftover paint and used that same leaf stencil and went with that titanium buff paint all over the card, over the layers, over everything, and just completely put that across the card. And I think it looks really cool. This is probably my favorite one because it's kind of a little bit abstract, sort of. It has that very card making like framed square of the paper, but then it has this other piece going over the whole thing. I also added in some of that same pencil just where the colored part was. I stamped the word thank you on there, and that one was number 7. Now I think I just have a couple pieces left of my thing, my one sheet wonder, and I wasn't quite sure. That piece that I'm using right now didn't seem to fit either way on the card, so I trimmed it. I just layered it with some mustardy colored paper, and I put a ribbon around it. Then I got out the floral, longwood florals, and I put that in the background with a little bit of the fossilized amber ink. And then I believe I put a word on it. I think I went back to that Stencil Club stencil and put the word magical on there. So as you can see, these are simple cards. They're not difficult to make. It's fun to just, keep using these little pieces that you've cut from your one sheet wonder. And I hope that you guys all try this. Maybe for your holiday cards this year, you can do some one sheet wonders. I think you would have a lot of fun. Use the stencils and inks that you have, and just keep layering and layering the colors. It's really more about the colors than it is. Well, obviously the stencil images too, make a difference. I mean, I was using leaves and florals and things for this to make it seem like fall. If you were going to do a Christmas or winter, you might want to use maybe some abstracted shapes or some snowflakes, something like that, with some blues and purples. It would be a lot of fun. I might do that myself. So for this one is the last one. I took that last piece and I cut it into 3 equal parts and layered those onto some of that sage green cardstock. And then I used that Born to Be Wild Animals to stencil Free Spirit and put that across with some of the scrap from the off-white cardstock. And then I grabbed a couple more of those little die cut tags I had, and I decided to use those on there because it didn't seem like something needed to be on there. So either I was going to stencil something on it or I was going to layer something. So I decided to take these little tags and color them with some of the Distress Oxide, stencil some of those bits from that floral stencil, give it a little bit of splatter, and then put some gold cord in the holes because they're tags, and put them on with some mounting strips. So I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please remember to give me a thumbs up, leave a comment or question below, subscribe if you haven't already, turn on your notification bells, and of course go over to Stencil Girl Products and look for all the stencils that I used today. And I believe that is it for me. 9 cards, one sheet wonder. Bye-bye.